welcome back to another episode of 10 Minute Strategy. My name is Peter Prop, and today I'm here with my friend Nikhil Vaish. And Nikhil, why don't you talk about Good Growth Club and your plans there?
Sure. So the idea basically is born out of a whole bunch of experiences that I've had, sort of like brand building, starting my own business, consulting with startups, sort of lived in this ecosystem for a long time. And one of the things I've sort of noticed recently, and it's probably in the last half a dozen years or so, we're teaching a whole generation of entrepreneurs to sort of build businesses based on the idea of blitzscaling, throwing money at the problem, or just sort of looking for something called hyper growth, which is like growing 10, 20, 30x. We're asking companies to do, it took Netflix, for example, 19 years to reach 100 million subscribers. Companies are expected to do that in 1 or 2 years now. Apple, for example, I think it took 19 years after the IPO to be valued at $10 billion. And today, companies in the space of 1 to 6 months between rounds of financing are reaching billions and billions of dollars of valuation on what I believe is vaporware, right, in terms of the business fundamentals. So that's something we've been noticing, and both my business partner and I advise startups, and we feel like we need to go back to focusing on the fundamentals and basically teaching this new generation of entrepreneurs how to build businesses based on brand fundamentals and the basics of business, like profitability is an important thing. It's not something you can think about 10 years down the road, right? And it feels like there's a lot of that going on right now. So that's the idea behind the Growth Club. It's really the Good Growth Club. It's a philosophy rooted in business and brand fundamentals. And the idea is to also build an ecosystem of mentors and partners who can come in and help and advise entrepreneurs in a nutshell.
Yeah. So you talked a little about how you got there, but talk a little about some of your career stops. Where did you start out? Where did that progress to? Things like that. And I'm sure some interesting brand stories along the way.
Sure. Yeah. So I worked on both on consumer and some actually iconic brands. I worked on Johnson and Johnson, Unilever, companies that have been around for 100+ years, right? Also in the B2B space, I've been lucky enough to work at Ogilvy on brands like IBM and Kodak. And I've kind of seen how these brands have been built brick by brick by brick, with a fundamental business model, with sort of an understanding of the value that brand can bring. For example, brand can be a shortcut and a heuristic for trust. If I go into, my child is sick, I see two options. I see a J&J medicine, and I see that logo versus some random, Asian company or a Chinese company. I'm going to pick the brand that I know, right? Similarly with, I put two cars in front of you, Peter, and, both made from the same factory, exactly the same internals. And I slap a Ferrari logo onto one and a Hyundai logo onto the other. Which one are you going to pick, right? And you'll pay a lot more for the logo. So there are lots of things brands can do, from differentiating your product to helping you command a premium to basically becoming a heuristic for trust, right? And that's something that I learned in my advertising days. After I left advertising, I also started my own company. So I've been a small business. I've sort of worn multiple hats. I've kind of lived in that world. And I understand how difficult it can be to get a company going, to be responsible for employees, and how, there is this notion, even with startups, when I advise them, the question they used to always ask me is, what is the one thing we can do to really get this going? And I'm like, there's no light switch. Right? It is one foot in front of the other. It is step by step. It's one customer at a time. That is the only way to build a business, right? And you have to focus on things like profitability. Those things are important. That's not something you can think about down the road. So it's really a combination of those experiences of having built, worked on and helped build iconic brands, run my own company, sort of worn that hat, advised startups and sat across the table from investors. So it's a culmination of all of those experiences, I feel, that informs the Good Growth Club and this philosophy that, businesses built on integrity and with a long-term vision have a much better chance of success and also create greater value for all stakeholders.
That's great.
Okay.
And so, when should a startup be, talking to you? What's the first time they should be calling someone like you, and what's the sort of input you want to give to them at that phase and along the phases to come? How does your support, your services sort of follow them?
Well, we're sort of thinking about it as the what we're calling, and we haven't probably got our words right yet, but the serious first time entrepreneur. So it's not the person who's kind of moonlighting and thinking about it as a side hustle and like trying it out, which is there's nothing wrong with that. In the 20s I tried a lot of different things, but that's probably not our target audience, right? We're looking at somebody who's worked about a decade, who kind of has an idea of what they don't want to do and what they want to do. They've sort of got a little bit of a runway, and they kind of have a business plan in terms of how they want to build this out. And usually it's one spouse continues to work and the other one goes and tries to build a company, right? That's who we're trying to talk to. And also, I think there is at least in the conversations we've been having, there is a whole group of people who don't want to go down the VC route, right? They don't necessarily want to become a unicorn overnight. Those are not things that motivate them. They actually want to build a company. They have an idea and they've identified a pain point, and there's a real problem that they want to solve. So that's sort of the person that we're talking to. And believe me, I have nothing against VCs. I have really good friends who are VCs. It's not that all VCs are bad, but there is this culture that exists that comes with strings attached, and there's a lot of pressure people are feeling, right? It's almost like people get on a hamster wheel. So that's
But
sort of the
it can be a lot of studying for the test, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So and that's who we want to speak to. And we kind of want to also bring in, because the other thing that's really important, and having been an entrepreneur, I know it's a really lonely road. And nobody in my network or my family had ever done this. So I really had nobody to turn to, right?
Right.
Or speak to. And I mean, sure, I had a lot of people supporting me, but they didn't necessarily know the journey that I was on. And so that's an important piece too. So and also the third piece, I think, is having an external sounding board, right? Somebody who can sort of look in from the window standing outside, who's in your corner, who has your back, who's done this before, but can sort of help you through the dark days. Because that's one thing I can tell you. There are a lot of dark days where you'll sit there and question, why the hell did I give up my paycheck
Yeah.
and go through this, right? So that's who we want to talk to, and that's the sort of support system we want to create within this community.
Very good. Very good. Well, it sounds like you're quite passionate about it. So I wish you every success, and I know that we plan on keeping in touch.
Thank you. Yeah.
Cool. Anything else you'd like to add, or any like big insight you want to just share as a starting point for um, possible entrepreneurs that are out there?
Yeah, I think I'll add one thing. So, I mean, there are a lot of people who might say we're pushing water uphill, right? Because brand is not something, the word brand itself, it feels like it sits at 30,000 feet on top of Everest, right? And to be fair, our industry sort of created this uh, idea that brand is this thing that it's very hard to touch and sort of a vaunted thing, and the average mortal cannot access it or use it, right? So that's one of the important things we want to do, is bring that down to earth and basically give entrepreneurs a toolbox to deal with and build and manage their brand. Because the way I look at it is, even if you don't care about the brand, your brand is being built with everything that you do. The
Right.
product you launch, your customer service. UPS, for example, realized after a long time that one of the most potent pieces of their brand that was impacting, likability or dislike was the UPS driver. Because
Right.
if he smiled or frowned, that was what the perception of the brand was in terms of the last touch point. Now, people don't, so to us, brand is not advertising, it's not messaging. It is literally everything you do, from the vision to how you motivate your employees and retain them, to giving them a purpose in their day-to-day work, to that last mile customer service employee, or how you unbox whatever it is you're receiving, or
Yeah.
how your customer talks about it, right? So, and I think that's the important piece here, is that it's not some and one last thing I'd say is also that most founders will tell you the brand person is like the fifth hire in a startup, right? Now, I get tech has to be the first hire, but I think the marketing person should be the second hire, because to me, they're two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah.
Technology is sort of like, and it's going to be very hard, and I think increasingly so, to actually differentiate based on your product or technology right down the road. Because the moment you launch a feature, it can be copied. Lyft and Uber are perfect examples. I open both apps, whichever sends it to me cheaper or faster. And frankly, I can't even tell the difference between the UI and the design, other than the color scheme. So, that's going to be hard to differentiate. And, as technology gets cheaper, AI gets even more sophisticated. So brand is going to be a potent differentiator. And I think it's going to be an important one down the road.
Excellent. Well, thanks for giving us a few insights today. I appreciate your time. and we'll see you around the city, I'm sure.
Thank you for having me, Peter. I really
All right.
appreciate it. All right.